Thank you for joining us here at the Korea Society. I am Steve Noerper with the Society, and I'm really delighted to have back today two of the most wonderful, genuine, and stellar minds in the field of Korean studies. Jung, who's with the Brookings Institution and who does just remarkable work in terms of her write-up and her thought leadership, and Terry, who is with the Center for Strategic and International Studies and is also a commentator on MSNBC. And it's wonderful to have you both back. Sue is with us at the top of the year to give us something of a forecasting session. So I'll let her look back and tell us how right she was. And Jung Pak was up with us in the early spring to talk about her perspectives then on the process post-Olympics and before we really got into the heart of the summitry, the two largely focused on inter-Korean summits and, of course, the June summit. So I'm excited to hear from them both what their current perspectives are in terms of that process and also in terms of where we are relative to the United States, North Korea, continuing dialogue, and Seoul's push to try to create some positive momentum and to establish some real progress as we move forward on the peninsula. So why don't we start first with Jung Pak and ask about your take on where we are today and where we've been this year in 2018. And Sue, we'll move to you in just a moment.
Thanks, Stephen. It's great to be here in New York again. As many of you know, I'm from New York, so it's always nice to be home, back in the embrace of the city. And hi, Sue. Stephen, thank you for having me today. So I wanted to go back, and I was looking through what was happening exactly this time around this time last year. And these are the statements that were being said by people in the Trump administration, senior officials in the Trump administration. In early December, the then National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, said, "The president has made it clear that on North Korea, now is not the time to talk. We are in the race to be able to solve this problem." And he added that the North Korea threat is increasing every day and that there's not much time left. The then Secretary of State Tillerson said, when he offered some flexibility on talks at the Atlantic Council last year, the White House immediately came out and said negotiations must wait with North Korea until the regime fundamentally improves its behavior. And the UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, said at the UN, we are at a time of reckoning. We have never sought war with North Korea, and if war comes, make no mistake, the North Korean regime will be utterly destroyed. And by the time that New Year's rolled around, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists had moved the doomsday clock to 2 minutes to midnight, which was the closest we'd been to midnight since the Cold War. And it pointed to the hyperbolic rhetoric between the United States and North Korea and provocative actions by both sides, and increasing the possibility of a nuclear war by accident or by miscalculation. Fast forward. We're on December 6th. The now National Security Advisor, John Bolton, says this week, North Korea has not lived up to their expectations, to their commitments so far. That's why the president thinks we need to have a summit again. Secretary of State Pompeo, who was the CIA director last year, said it will take time. We are prepared to be patient. So just in that span of 12 months, we're racing toward nuclear war. And I'm not sure if you felt it in New York, but in D.C. there was a pall of something big about to happen. A year later, we're at a situation where President Trump says, "I'm willing to be patient. They can take as long as they want," and that we're looking at a second POTUS Kim Jong-un summit. So I think it's a remarkable turn of events. And when I look back on what's happened, I think about who drove these changes. And I remember writing last fall about how to stop the momentum, to stop time and stop the clock, all Kim had to do was offer an olive branch and see who would bite. And the olive branch was the Olympics and better inter-Korean engagement. And President Moon has done a good job of lowering the temperature by engaging with Kim. But we're also in a situation where the North Koreans are still racing toward nuclear weapons development and a second strike capability. And yet we still have dialogue, which is the way to go. But I think that I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the North Koreans are going ahead with their covert activities.
Mm-hmm. Sue.
Hi. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Yes.
we can. We can hear you perfectly.
Well, I'd rather be in New York than here, so I'm sorry I'm not there. Sorry, let me just turn this off. Okay. It's easy going right after Jung because, as usual, I 100% agree with her assessment in terms of where we've been, where we are going. It's absolutely true. What a difference a year makes, right? So not only what Jung was talking about, but we just went from President Trump, calling Kim Jong-un a rockman on a suicide mission, whose country that he threatened to totally destroy, to now having fallen in love with Kim Jong-un over the most beautiful love letters that they've ever exchanged. So I just remember a year ago at CSIS was working on the deterrence and how to deter and contain North Korea in the middle of all this bloody nose stuff. And even Jung and Bruce from Heritage 9 wrote an op-ed on why bloody nose was a bad idea. So, again, fast forward, it's quite unbelievable what has occurred.
I think those of us up here in New York, where I think you tend to have a pragmatic, measured bottom line bunch from finance, from media, from international organizations, tend to be allowing a little bit more latitude, though I think if there's optimism, it's certainly extremely cautious. From Seoul, there seems to be a disjuncture, and we've just had Minister Cho, the unification minister, in here at the Korea Society, who offered some very thoughtful, patient advice, and who was very strong in his call for coordination with the United States. But why do you think, both of you, we're at this point where there seems to be, if not discord, at least some light between the allies on the pacing, on the expectation? And do you see that fissure having grown over this year? And is this something that we can stem through coordination going forward? This new working group, for example. What are ways that Washington and Seoul can harmonize better, given the very real concerns that you've both raised? We'll start with you, Jung.
Yeah, I think discord or conflict and compromise and negotiations should be part of any alliance relationship. And for me, what is important about alliance relationships is the flexibility of that alliance. As in this long history of a 60-year-old alliance, there have been ups and downs, and what's important is how elastic is that relationship, and how much does one side, how both sides are flexible in their dealings with the other. And I would say that there is a strong sense that there are disagreements, or at least misaligned or unaligned objectives in the relationship with North Korea. For South Korea, they want to make sure the assumption is that the working assumption is that greater engagement with North Korea, more talks, economic benefits, lifting of sanctions would spur Kim to denuclearize. Whereas the U.S. position, and I think President Trump and the administration has been pretty clear on this, is until recently, that no sanctions removal or lifting or loosening until fully verified denuclearization. So President Moon had committed or continued to state that these are the denuclearization and inter-Korean engagement would go on the same track. But what's been pretty clear over the past few months is that inter-Korean engagement has been much easier and has been going at a much faster pace than denuclearization talks with the United States. And that's where that fissure or the potential seams are evident.
Good. So you're urging patience. And Sue, did you have anything you wanted to add on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I understand South Korea's strategy and what President Moon is trying to do. I think the whole fire and fury rhetoric from last year really spooked South Korea. And, they're trying to really just make progress on the inter-Korea front, just to really decrease tension. And, if you talk to some South Korean officials privately, I'm not sure if everybody even thinks it will necessarily lead to denuclearization. But the idea is that by talking to Kim and by really sort of bring him into this international community and engaging with him, even if he has not made a decision to denuclearize, that can influence him to make the right kind of decision down the road.
Are we allowing enough space, Jung, for Moon Jae-in to do what he and his administration feel they need to do? Do you feel the Americans are tacking in the right way on this?
I think the working group is probably, we should have had that working group probably a year ago when we started talking, and that the special representative should have been appointed a year ago when Kim made that pivot toward engagement, because it's relatively easier to have maximum pressure. It's relatively easier to have unity of international action against on the North Korea issue when North Korea is being bad. But it's so much more difficult and so much more complicated as national priorities come to the fore when Kim is engaging. So I think there have been reports where the South Korean entities and South Korean organizations and governments and the government were slapped on the wrist for potential sanctions, not implementing sanctions in the way that we would expect. So I think it's there are going to be some seams, but I think we have to make sure that this is what that everybody understands that this is what North Korea takes advantage of, is the potential seams in trying to rip open those potential areas of conflict.
Mm-hmm. So Sue, given what you've just said, do you think denuclearization ultimately is in the cards? And will we see in a second Trump-Kim summit some agreement to declaration, to verification, that will be enough for us to continue this process forward?
I don't think denuclearization that's really complete, verifiable, irreversible, or final fully. I don't see that happening with North Korea. What I do see potentially, if Kim makes this decision to make a deal with President Trump, because from Kim's calculation, President Trump is still the best possible U.S. president that he could make a deal with, because there's no other president that might put, let's say, a peace treaty or that kind of alliance equities on the table for even negotiation. I could see that Kim making a decision to make some sort of a deal, maybe to dismantle Yongbyon in return for peace declaration or sanctions relief, make a deal on intercontinental ballistic missile. Some sort of deal is possible, but not the kind of dramatic deal that would lead to dismantlement or their.
Should we be looking, as some people have suggested in their visits here and discussions on the stage, demilitarization, arms control? Are these interim measures that will bring us a bit closer to where we want in terms of eliminating a clear and present danger to the United States? Sue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a decision that the policymakers, the Trump administration really has to make, which is instead of going after pursuing this kind of very unrealistic goal, completely just a final fully dismantle their program, are there some of the things that we can do? And I do believe some sort of a threat reduction, any kind of deal that reduces the threat coming from North Korea, even from on the conventional front, arms front. I think that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we have to weigh the costs of that, and I'm not saying that I don't have an answer, because I think the policymakers are still trying to decide what kind of approach we need to take, whether it's arms control or engagement, or both. If I were providing the pros and cons, or some of the things to look out for, if we're looking at an interim agreement, which is basically what we have now, which is a freeze for freeze, is that time is not necessarily on our side. As we can tell from recent reports, that North Korea continues to develop its ballistic missile programs and its nuclear weapons, as well as, they're about to hold their winter training cycle. So they haven't really stopped, other than offering these very superficial, almost theatrical things that they can offer up to the U.S. president. The reason that time is is advantageous for North Korea is that whatever they offer up, or whatever concessions that they make, that would strengthen voices for sanctions lifting in a premature fashion. Sanctions loosening will feed into the regime funds that will undoubtedly go toward their weapons program, and it would also bolster Kim's status and cement the North Koreans' claimed nuclear weapons power status in the region. So I think there's something to be said about a freeze for freeze, and about arms control and having containment as our answer. But I think we have to be very aware of the fact that the disadvantage of having time on North Korea's side. I would point out that the president has continue to talk about there's no missile testing, there's no nuclear testing in over a year. Let's go back to 1998 to 2006, where there was no missile testing or nuclear testing, and then they sped out of the gate in 2006. So I think the absence of testing does not mean that they've stopped their programs. It plays well on TV that they haven't done these things, and on a very superficial level, it looks like there's progress. But we have to be very practical and be aware of where we are and where North Korea is on this issue. And I don't think any Korea watcher would say to you with a straight face that North Korea is committed to denuclearizing.
Steve, can I say something?
Yes, Sue.
I totally agree. Time is not on our side. I don't think time is on our side in any policy that we pursue. And I don't think we should give up denuclearization as a goal in terms of at least rhetorically. I don't see any U.S. administration saying, okay, we now give that up as a goal and we're going to do something else, because it just has really negative consequences that we don't want, like potential regional proliferation and what does it say to rogue actors. As a policy matter, we're not going to give it up. But what I'm saying is we need to think about what is achievable with North Korea. So that might not be stated as a policy, but I'm not sure if we have a realistic picture of North Korea. As Jung just said, just because they stopped testing, it doesn't mean they have stopped their nuclear and missile program.
I'm in agreement with everything Sue says, and I'd also add that the administration has kind of boxed itself in by saying and being very and celebrating the fact that we have this Trump-Kim relationship that's very good. They're in love. They write each other letters. They might be calling each other for all we know. But so there is that leader-to-leader relationship, and the administration has said this has never been done before. It's great that our president is trying this new thing. But on the other hand, it's also saying, and the second prong is that the administration is saying we're not going to buy the same horse a third time or fourth time or the fifth time. They're not going to make the same mistake of the Obama administration, the Bush administration, or the Clinton administration, where you're in effect giving a lot of benefits and concessions without any real progress. So and no sanctions lifting. So they're not going to lift sanctions. So they're boxed in with the leader-to-leader relationship, but also that they have very little flexibility on the policy front because they have said, and they've been very clear that they're not going to lift sanctions unless there's FFVD. So what that means is that Kim takes advantage of that relationship with Trump. That would, I think that's the reason behind some of the stalemate that we've reached. North Korea's refusal to meet or talk about the technical issues related to denuclearization, verification, inspectors coming into these facilities, or even a list of their facilities and of their fissile materials. So Kim is relying on the administration's talking points to go straight to the top.
Thank you both, and I'm hoping we can talk a bit more too about Moon Jae-in's role and his role in terms of steadying the rudder at a couple of points this past year that have been critical in terms of getting the two to Singapore when it looked like that might not happen at one point, and also in the wake of a slowdown in July and August with some activity here in New York in terms of the UNGA opening and Moon Jae-in's speech to the Korea Society, Council on Foreign Relations and Asia Society, all I think of which were critical in trying to get the two back and talking. So we know this is a complicated process. And as you've indicated, Sue, you also have opinions from Moscow and from Beijing that are weighing in and weighing heavy. And I know our audience may want to ask about aspects of China's role in this. Thank you. If you could help me in thanking Jung Pak and Sue Terry for their time today. And as much as we've looked back at 2018 and the complexities, and you've rightly moved us along the meter to sort of the state of new realities, I think you've also given us some thought for how to lean forward into 2019, and certainly here at the Korea Society, and I'm sure at Brookings and CSIS, we'll all be looking together at what should be interesting because we all recognize this is a historic time. To that end, I would like to invite you all back on December 20th. We're doing a bonus program for the holidays, and we have David Kong from USC flying in. We have Ambassador Thomas Hubbard, our chairman, who's with McClarty Associates here on stage. And they'll be with our president, Thomas Byrne, to talk about the negotiation process and some next steps in the course of this. So we'll continue this conversation, and we'd love to have you back. For those of our journalists who are visiting from Asia, thank you for coming today. And please do stream that program if you're not here in New York City. And to our members who have supported us so generously this season, it's been wonderful to have you here for our 2018 fall season, and we look forward to welcoming you back in 2019. And please do come see us for the holiday bonus on December 20th. Thank you to Jonathan Corrado, our Associate Director of Policy, who has done all the logistics, to Peter Stemke in our sound and video booth, and again to all of you for your time and consideration today. Finally, again, to Jung Pak, Sue Terry, thank you so much.
Thank you.